I inherited a $450,000 house at 21. At 26, I found out my father had been practicing my signature for months. Hey friends! Got a sec? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit subscribe. It's quick for you, but it really means a lot to us. Alright, let's dive into today's story. Original post. I'm still shaking as I type this. 3 days ago, I received a notice from a bank I've never done business with, informing me that I was 60 days past due on a $200,000 second mortgage payment. The property in question? My house. The house I inherited from my grandmother 5 years ago, which I own outright. The house that has never had a mortgage on it since I've owned it. My name is Lucas, I'm 26, and I work as a project manager for a construction company. I'm not wealthy by any means, but I've been careful with money. My grandmother left me her house when she passed, a modest 3-bedroom home in a decent neighborhood. It's worth about $450,000 in today's market. I've maintained it meticulously, treating it as the gift it was meant to be. The notice came from Meridian Financial Services. According to their records, I had signed papers 4 months ago for a $200,000 second mortgage at 8.2% interest. The signature on the documents? It looked like mine, but something was off. The formation of the letters was too deliberate, too careful, like someone had traced it. My hands were trembling as I called the bank. The loan officer, Patricia, pulled up my file. She confirmed that I had come in personally with my father, James, who had co-signed as my financial advisor under a power of attorney document. She even described me, brown hair, about 5 feet 10 inches, wearing a blue polo shirt. The problem? I'm 6 feet 2 inches with black hair, and I was in Seattle on a work trip that entire week. Ma'am, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I need you to listen very carefully. I never took out this loan. I've never been to your bank. And I absolutely never gave my father power of attorney over anything. The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like hours before Patricia quietly said, Mr. Thompson, I think you need to come to our office immediately. And you might want to bring a lawyer. I hung up and immediately called my father. He answered on the third ring, his voice carrying that fake cheerfulness he uses when he's nervous. Lucas, how's my successful son doing? Dad, did you take out a loan against my house? The pause told me everything I needed to know. Now, son, before you get upset, did you forge my signature on a $200,000 mortgage? It's not what you think. Noah's startup needed capital, and the venture capitalists required matching funds. This was an investment in your brother's future. In all our futures. The company is about to explode, and we'll pay it back triple within the year. My younger brother Noah, 24, had been trying to launch a tech startup for the past 2 years. Something about revolutionary inventory management software. My father had been his biggest cheerleader, already having invested his entire retirement savings into it. Apparently, that wasn't enough. You committed fraud, I said, my voice deadly calm. You forged legal documents. You stole from me. Stole? I'm your father. Everything I do is for this family. You're being selfish, Lucas. You have a house worth nearly $500,000, and you couldn't help your brother achieve his dreams? Your grandmother would be ashamed. That's when I hung up. My grandmother, who had explicitly left the house to me because she knew my father's tendency to throw good money after bad. She'd watched him gamble away inheritance after inheritance, always chasing the next big thing. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone with lawyers. By that evening, I had hired Jennifer Martinez, a financial fraud attorney who specialized in family theft cases. Her first words after reviewing the preliminary documents were, "This is one of the more brazen cases of identity theft I've seen. Your father didn't just forge your signature. He had someone impersonate you at the bank." The impersonator, it turned out, was likely my brother Noah. Jennifer immediately filed a police report and contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Forging power of attorney documents and using them to obtain loans is a federal offense. The fact that it crossed state lines, the bank was headquartered in another state, made it even more serious. I also learned something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't the first attempt. Jennifer's investigation found 2 other loan applications at different banks that had been rejected due to inconsistencies in the documentation. My father had been shopping around for months, trying to find a bank that would approve the fraudulent loan. My phone has been blowing up with calls and texts from family members. My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, left me a voicemail calling me heartless for trying to destroy the family over money. My cousin Michael texted that I was probably going to hell for betraying blood. The only support came from my mother, who divorced my father 8 years ago. "I'm not surprised," she said when I told her. Your father always believed the rules didn't apply to him. Document everything, Lucas. He'll try to make you the villain in this story. As I write this, I'm sitting in my living room, the same room where my grandmother used to read to me when I was young. She worked as a seamstress for 40 years to pay for this house. She raised me here for 3 years when my parents were finding themselves, code for my father's gambling addiction hitting rock bottom. Tomorrow, I meet with the FBI agents assigned to my case. Jennifer says they're very interested, especially since this appears to be a conspiracy involving multiple parties and forged government documents. I'm not backing down. My father stole from me, and he used my brother to do it. They made their choice. Now they'll face the consequences. Update 1, 2 weeks later. The last 2 weeks have been a masterclass in watching a house of cards collapse. The FBI executed search warrants at both my father's apartment and Noah's office, a pretentious loft space he was renting with investor money. They seized computers, phones, documents, and boxes of financial records. The lead investigator, Agent Sarah Coleman, told me they found evidence of extensive planning, including practice sheets where my father had traced my signature dozens of times, a wig and clothing purchased specifically to match my appearance, text messages between my father and Noah discussing the banking costume, emails where they debated which banks would be least likely to scrutinize the documents, a PowerPoint presentation Noah had created called Project Lucas, outlining the entire fraud. Yes, my brother was stupid enough to create a PowerPoint presentation about committing felony fraud. But the real bombshell came when they analyzed Noah's startup finances. Not only was the company hemorrhaging money, but Noah had been lying to investors about his numbers. He'd been using creative accounting to make it look like the company had more contracts than it actually did. The $200,000 from my fraudulent mortgage? It was already gone, spent on expensive office furniture, a company Tesla, and client entertainment that looked suspiciously like vacation expenses. The FBI also found something I hadn't expected. My father had taken out 3 credit cards in my name over the past year, racking up $45,000 in debt. He'd been making minimum payments to keep them from showing up on my credit report, using money from my brother's startup funds. It was a twisted shell game of fraud built on fraud. My father was arrested last Tuesday at 6 a.m. The neighbors in his apartment complex watched as FBI agents let him out in handcuffs. He was charged with wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of government documents. Noah was arrested the same morning at his girlfriend's apartment. His charges were similar, plus additional counts related to investor fraud. They both made bail, of course. My Aunt Patricia put up her house as collateral, still convinced this was all a misunderstanding. My father immediately went on social media, posting a lengthy message about how his ungrateful son was destroying the family over a temporary loan. He claimed I was bitter about Noah's success and jealous of their close relationship. The comment section was a war zone. Half the extended family bought his sob story. The other half, who'd been burned by my father's schemes before, finally felt vindicated. My Uncle Robert, who'd lost $30,000 to one of my father's sure-thing investments a decade ago, simply commented, "James never changes. I'm proud of Lucas for standing up to him." But the real victory came yesterday. Jennifer called with news from the bank. They were reversing the entire mortgage. Since it was obtained through fraud, I wouldn't be liable for a penny. Additionally, they were cooperating fully with the FBI investigation and had already terminated the employee who had processed the loan without proper verification. My father, meanwhile, hired a defense attorney who immediately tried to negotiate a plea deal. The federal prosecutor, according to Jennifer, laughed at the initial offer. The evidence was overwhelming, and they wanted to make an example of this case. Noah's startup investors also learned about his arrest and the fraudulent financial statements. Within 48 hours, they'd frozen all company assets and initiated their own civil lawsuits. The company website now shows a simple, under maintenance message, but everyone knows it's dead. The family pressure has intensified. I've received calls from relatives I haven't spoken to in years, all with the same message: family doesn't do this to family. My father's mother, my grandmother on his side, called me crying, begging me to drop the charges. "He's your father," she sobbed. "He made a mistake. Don't you have any forgiveness in your heart?" "He didn't make a mistake, Grandma," I replied. "He planned this for months. He committed multiple felonies. He tried to steal my home. But family doesn't do this to family," I said, using their own words against them. "He broke that rule first." Update 2, 1 month later. The saga continues, and the revelations keep getting worse. During discovery, the FBI found evidence that this wasn't my father's first rodeo with fraud. He had apparently done something similar to my Uncle Thomas 15 years ago, forging his signature on a business loan. Thomas never pressed charges because my grandfather was dying at the time, and he didn't want to cause more family drama. That decision emboldened my father, teaching him he could get away with it if he played the family card right. The FBI also uncovered Noah's laptop password. He wrote it on a post-it note stuck to his monitor. Criminal mastermind, he is not. The laptop contained a folder called Insurance Policy, with hundreds of photos and documents related to me. They'd been building a profile for over a year. Photos of my house from every angle, my work schedule, obtained by having Noah drop by my office as a loving brother, copies of my utility bills, stolen from my mailbox, screenshots of my social media posts to track when I was traveling, a recorded phone conversation where Noah pretended to be me, practicing my voice. The recording was particularly chilling. In it, Noah said, "Hi, I'm Lucas Thompson," over and over, trying to match my cadence and tone. My father can be heard coaching him. No, he speaks slower. And he always sounds a little tired. Try again." They'd rehearsed impersonating me. Jennifer used this evidence to file a civil lawsuit in addition to the criminal charges. We're suing for actual damages, the fraudulent mortgage amount plus interest, punitive damages for the intentional nature of the fraud, emotional distress, attorney fees, identity theft damages. The lawsuit also allowed us to freeze my father and Noah's assets. This caused immediate chaos. Noah's girlfriend, Ashley, suddenly learned that the luxury apartment Noah was renting was about to be evicted. The Tesla was repossessed within a week. My father's checking account, which had about $8,000 from his Social Security, was frozen. This led to what I call the Thanksgiving incident. I wasn't planning to attend family Thanksgiving, for obvious reasons. But my Aunt Patricia, still trying to play peacemaker, convinced me to come for Grandma's sake. Against my better judgment, I agreed, with the condition that my father and Noah wouldn't be there. I arrived to find them both in the living room. "We need to talk as a family," my aunt announced, like this was some kind of intervention. My father launched into a rehearsed speech about forgiveness, family bonds, and how blood is thicker than water. He actually had the audacity to say that I was tearing the family apart over money. "You committed fraud," I said simply. "It was a loan," he insisted. "I was going to pay it back." "With what money?" "Noah's company is bankrupt. You're living on Social Security." That's when Noah stood up, pointing at me. "You know what your problem is? You've always been selfish. Grandma gave you that house because you were her favorite, and you've lorded it over the rest of us ever since. She gave me the house because she knew Dad would do exactly what he did, try to steal it." The room erupted. Family members took sides. My cousin Brian actually stood up to defend me, revealing that my father had borrowed $5,000 from him 2 years ago and never paid it back. My Aunt Margaret admitted my father had tried to get her to co-sign a loan last year using suspicious documents. The final blow came when my mother arrived. My aunt had secretly invited her, hoping she'd talk sense into me. She walked in, surveyed the chaos, and delivered the killing blow. "James, you did the same thing to my father 20 years ago. Forged his signature on a car loan. He was too sick with cancer to press charges, but I have the paperwork. I've given it to Lucas's attorney." The room went silent. My father's face went from red to white. Even Aunt Patricia looked shocked. We left together, my mother and I. As we walked to our cars, she handed me a folder. "I've been saving this for the right moment. Your father thinks everyone forgets, but I've kept records of every scam, every lie, every theft for the past 25 years. The folder was thick. Really thick. Update 3, 2 months later. The criminal trial was set for next month, but 2 weeks ago, everything changed. The federal prosecutor called Jennifer with news. They'd found more victims. It turns out my father had a whole side business in fraud. Using his knowledge from years of working in banking, something he'd always bragged about but I never verified, he'd been helping other people forge documents for a fee. The FBI found evidence of at least 12 other cases where he'd provided consultation on document forgery, taking payment in cash to avoid a paper trail. One of these cases involved an elderly woman named Dorothy, whose son hired my father to help transfer her assets while she was in the early stages of dementia. Another involved a small business owner whose partner wanted to buy him out without his knowledge. This elevated the charges from simple fraud to running a criminal enterprise. The prosecutor indicated they were now looking at RICO charges, the same laws used to prosecute organized crime. Faced with potentially spending the rest of his life in federal prison, my father finally broke. He agreed to a plea deal, 4 years in federal prison, full restitution, and cooperation in prosecuting the other cases. Noah tried to hold out longer, but when his lawyer explained that he was looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted at trial, he folded too. His plea deal, 2 years in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and he has to pay restitution. The restitution was where things got interesting. The judge ordered that all of my father's assets be liquidated to pay victims. This included his retirement accounts, about $45,000 remaining, his car, everything in his apartment of value. Future Social Security payments would be garnished. Since I was the primary victim, I would receive the bulk of the restitution. But here's the kicker. My mother's evidence proved a pattern of fraud going back decades, which allowed Jennifer to argue for additional punitive damages in the civil case. The settlement conference was last week. My father's attorney looked defeated as he explained that my father had no choice but to agree to our terms. The final settlement: $280,000 in damages, the original $200,000 plus interest and fees, all of my father's remaining assets, Noah's startup assets, what little remained, a permanent restraining order preventing either of them from contacting me. The judge also did something unexpected. He ordered that my father publicly apologize to me in court, on the record. Standing there in his orange jumpsuit, my father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. His voice was barely a whisper. I apologize to my son Lucas for violating his trust, stealing his identity, and attempting to steal his home. I acted out of greed and entitlement, and I destroyed our relationship for money. I am sorry. Noah's apology was even more pathetic. He actually cried, blubbering about how our father had manipulated him, how he just wanted to make the family proud, how he never meant for it to go so far. The judge was unmoved. Final update: 3 months later. It's been 3 months since my father reported to federal prison. Noah reports next week. He was given time to get his affairs in order, which mostly meant watching his life completely implode. His girlfriend Ashley left him the moment the plea deal was announced. His investors are suing him separately in civil court. His name is mud in the tech startup community. Last I heard, he was working at a call center, trying to save money for when he gets out of prison. My father is serving his time at a minimum security facility about 4 hours away. I've received several letters from him, all unopened, all returned to sender. My Aunt Patricia tried to guilt me into visiting him, but I shut that down immediately. "He's your father," she said for the 100th time. "No," I replied. "He's a criminal who happens to share my DNA. Nothing more." The family has essentially split into 2 camps. Those who still support my father have cut me off entirely. They've created a narrative where I'm the villain who destroyed a good man over a misunderstanding. I'm fine with that. These are the same people who enabled his behavior for decades. The other camp, surprisingly larger than I expected, has rallied around me. My Uncle Robert started a group chat called Survivors of James, where family members share stories of times my father scammed them. It's been therapeutic and eye-opening. The total amount he's stolen from family over the years? Nearly $400,000. As for me, the restitution money came through last month. After paying off the fraudulent credit cards my father opened in my name and covering all my legal fees, I had about $180,000 left. I used it to do something that would make my grandmother proud and my father furious. I bought a new property. Not just any property, a house in a gated community with 24/7 security, cameras, and a gate code required for entry. It's my fortress, a place where my father, Noah, or any of their flying monkeys can never reach me again. The house is titled in an LLC, with additional legal protections that would make any future fraud attempts nearly impossible. I kept my grandmother's house too, renting it out to a lovely young family. The rental income goes into a trust, another layer of legal protection. Jennifer helped me set up everything to be essentially judgment-proof and fraud-proof. I also did something else. I legally changed my last name. I now carry my maternal grandfather's surname, Richardson. Lucas Richardson. It has a nice ring to it, and more importantly, it's a name not tainted by association with a federal prisoner. My mother helped me with the name change paperwork. Over coffee last week, she said something that stuck with me. "You know, your grandmother would be proud. Not happy, she never wanted this for any of us, but proud that you stood up for yourself. She always worried your father would try something like this." She was right. I found a letter my grandmother had left with her lawyer, to be given to me only if something like this happened. In it, she wrote, "My dear Lucas, if you're reading this, your father has likely done something terrible. Please know that I left you the house not just because I love you, but because I knew you were the only one strong enough to stand up to him when the time came. Don't let family guilt you into accepting abuse. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to steal from you. Be strong. Love, Grandma." I had the letter framed. It hangs in my new home office, a reminder that standing up for yourself isn't betrayal, it's self-respect. The last I heard about my father came from another inmate's family member who recognized the case. Apparently, my father is still running scams in prison, trying to convince other inmates to invest in his commissary trading schemes. Some people never change. Noah sent me one last message through a cousin before reporting to prison. I hope you're happy. You got everything you wanted. He's wrong though. What I wanted was a father and brother I could trust. What I got was the painful knowledge that they never existed in the first place. But I also got something else. Freedom from their toxic influence, justice for their crimes, and a future where I never have to look over my shoulder again. My new house has a security system with cameras that save to the cloud. Every door has multiple locks. My mail goes to a P.O. box. All my financial accounts have two-factor authentication and fraud alerts. Some might call it paranoid. I call it learning from experience. To anyone reading this who's dealing with family members who steal, manipulate, or commit fraud, document everything. Press charges. Don't let family be an excuse for criminal behavior. The people telling you to forgive and forget are often the ones who benefit from enabling the abuse. My father is serving 4 years in federal prison. Noah is serving 2. I'm serving a life sentence of freedom from their influence, and honestly, I've never been happier. The house is quiet now. No unexpected visits from family trying to guilt me. No mysterious charges on my credit cards. No one trying to steal my identity or my property. Just peace. Sometimes, the best family you can have is the one you choose to keep at a distance. And sometimes, justice isn't revenge, it's simply holding people accountable for their crimes, even when those people share your DNA. Especially when those people share your DNA. Epilogue. 6 months later. One final update for closure. My father was recently transferred to a different facility after getting caught running a gambling ring using commissary items. He's lost all good behavior privileges and will serve his full sentence. Noah was released to a halfway house last month but violated parole within a week by trying to start another business without permission. He's back in prison for another 6 months minimum. I recently got engaged to my girlfriend of 2 years, someone who stood by me through this entire ordeal. We're planning a small wedding, family not invited, except for my mother and the cousins who supported me. My grandmother's house, the one that started all this, continues to generate rental income. I've put every penny into a scholarship fund in her name for students studying fashion design, honoring her memory as a seamstress who worked hard for everything she had. The fortress I bought. It's become a home. A real home, filled with chosen family, peace, and the security of knowing that no one can ever take it away from me. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about protection. Sometimes it's about never allowing yourself to be a victim again. And sometimes it's about learning that family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by trust, respect, and love. 3 things my father and brother never understood. 3 things they'll have plenty of time to think about in federal prison.